Welcome to the Marketing to SMEs podcast. We're talking to the world's leading brands about how they work with the most innovative founders across the country. Thank you for coming on the show. You are guest number 1, which is quite exciting, so no pressure, and we can take this any way we'd like. But I guess, would you like to give yourself a bit of an introduction?
Sure. So, Chloe Fenton. I head up marketing for Allica Bank. Allica Bank are a SME-focused, relationship-led bank, and I've been with them since October 2020, and I look after all things marketing. So that could be our brand presence, it could be how we get new customers in, it can be just supporting the business with general support and assets, etc. as well.
And you've got a bit of a background working with smaller businesses and founders, so tell us a bit about that and how you got into this world.
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly, actually before this, I was 10 years in Silicon Valley tech companies working with really big enterprises. So I decided that I couldn't really relate to selling to a CIO of a massive bank or, you know, someone who I never was going to aspire to be in those roles. And so I took a bit of a step into a different industry and joined the fintech industry. Joined a company called Liberis, who focus specifically on SMEs, more at the sort of smaller scale, helping them with finance. And it was great because it was a really awesome product. It's a business cash advance, it was really for sort of retail, hospitality type industries, those that use take card payments. And the way it would work is that we would fund them an amount, and then rather than them paying back in loan installments that are fixed and don't really flex with businesses that might have quite a lot of seasonality, we took a small percentage of their card payments. So I absolutely loved this concept. I thought, what a genius idea. You know, it's actually really sounds like finance that actually works for a business rather than, because the finance world, you know, it's had some bad past in terms of how it really helps, and particularly from an SME perspective, how can you actually really support that business with finance? And so I loved it. And then, yeah, I worked there for a number of years, and then decided that I really enjoyed this from a marketing perspective, being able to actually really get to know those businesses and feel that you had more of a connection with them, and being able to actually feel that you're making a difference with your product. And I loved that, and marketing to them was really fun.
What were the, I guess, some of the shocks or the surprises of jumping to the other side of the table and actually working with SMEs? Were there any real challenges there?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that shocked me most actually was, so having come from enterprise marketing, was that it was more like consumer marketing. Although it's called B2B, and it is B2B, it's a completely different method of communication and ways that you reach these customers. So it really, for me, it was quite a dramatic change in all the marketing techniques that I'd learned and known. It was almost starting again for me. But it was a much more, for me, fulfilling and enjoyable way. And I think the thing that's really interesting with this group of people as well is that everyone's needs are so vastly different, and you can't categorize SMEs even into, you know, what you think is a segment. There's often so many nuances in that segment. And so I think that was really interesting for me to have to completely learn a lot of techniques again. Much shorter sales cycles, for example. You know, we're talking about instant sign-ups rather than a 2-year procurement process. But also it was the understanding the customer needs that I think was quite a wake-up call for me. It's like, you cannot take your eye off the ball here. Things are changing constantly in their worlds, and you need to kind of be on top of it. Otherwise, you're going to be irrelevant to them quite quickly.
And do you think that, you mentioned it's like consumer marketing, is that, do you think, because of the founder's personal connection to their brand, it is just a much more personalised thing?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. And that's actually something that I think is, as a marketeer, you have to really tread carefully as well, because you want to support businesses, but you know that they do have a personal, emotional connection to their business. This is their life a lot of the time. And so you don't want to kind of bowl in with some proposition that is either irrelevant, it's going to waste their time. You've got to understand that this is their life. And I think also, yeah, from a consumer perspective, I guess it's that emotional connection, and something like finance is a confusing product and it's a confusing world. And so actually what you want to do is try and humanize it and make it as accessible as possible, and make it easy for those customers to be able to access it, understand it, and be able to use it to better their business.
And I love how you've broken down the differences in SMEs and how many different almost categories there are of them. Obviously, it's everyone with up to 250 employees. So it was much smaller businesses in your first role in the SME world.
Yes.
Who is it that you work with now specifically? How do you define that?
We work with a really specific segment, and I think as well the term SME is so broad, isn't it? As you've just said, I mean, you've got a whole spectrum. I mean, it's kind of a term that's irrelevant, and we're really conscious of that as well with our customers. A lot of them don't think of themselves as SMEs or small businesses particularly. We work with this segment. It's about 500,000 businesses, but they have about 1 trillion of turnover, and it's 25% of the economy, yet they're really underserved. And it's that group that are they're not micro businesses, they're not just starting up, they're a little more established. They are not really trying to aspire to be a humongous business. They might have a family-run business, they've got something that works, and they're doing well and they are expanding. But again, they're not trying to kind of grow by hundreds and hundreds. They're never aspiring to that potentially. They're looking for finance for investment and growth, and they need long-term support and financial support that could be payment related as well. And the thing that these businesses have really lost is the support from banks, particularly on a relationship-led level. Lots of banks have taken away these relationship managers from those businesses and just lumped them into call centres, or there's been lots of product development, but more kind of along the lines for smaller businesses. And there's this group that have just been completely ignored. And we really focus on that specific segment. And at the moment, that segment is not being served with a kind of full suite of payment and credit services. And that's the exact market that we operate in and what we're building for those businesses.
So what we're seeing is so many of the big brands are now having the realization that actually SMEs have this significant impact on the economy and the production rates. What are the pitfalls that you think a lot of these big brands are falling into, where they're coming from a point of view of it's not their background and it's a relatively new arm of the business? What should they be looking out for?
I guess to touch on something I said earlier about understanding needs, I think that is something that is really key here, is what you may think you know about your customers and SMEs. It just changes so regularly, and they're so impacted by changes in the economy or, new laws or regulations, that kind of thing. And I think if you're going to go into the SME space, you've got to keep on top of it, and that's the only way you're going to stay relevant, and you've got to listen to your customers. We do a lot of listening to both SMEs, and we work with brokers who know the SME market really well. And we just take a lot of feedback, and sometimes we're like, tell us what we need to do, because you can have the best product or the best idea, but if people don't need it, understand it, or have a way to access it and without it impacting them as well. So I think that's another thing actually, is the kind of the burden for some SME owners to use something. So something like a finance solution, for example, it's confusing, it can be it can be time consuming, it can be annoying, but they might need it. And so it's like, how do you actually make this, whatever you're offering to them, really accessible and really easy for them to use, and make it so that it just enhances their business rather than kind of being a hindrance?
Yeah, I think that the change in needs and challenges for SMEs are vast and as you say, change so rapidly. So how do you stay on top of that? So you're obviously in HQ here in London. How do you make sure you're on top of what the challenges are for a high growth founder that's in Norwich or somewhere else in the country?
Our whole proposition is around having relationship banking. We know to do that you need people in the ground, you need people out in the local communities who are there supporting local businesses. And I think that locality element's really important, because actually you find you get more commonalities between a local set of businesses than, say, all businesses that sell the same product across the country. And so what we do is we have relationship managers who we're basing across all of the UK, who support businesses in their local communities. So we have those ears on the ground. So I work hand in hand with those relationship managers, constantly getting feedback, meeting with customers when I can as well, and just trying to really stay on top of understanding what's going on and getting feedback. The same with the broker community. We have exactly the same setup. We have local business development managers who work with those brokers. We do a lot of surveying. We have a really well responded to broker survey that we send every quarter. We get some fantastic feedback from that, and we ask obviously service-led questions about how we're doing, but lots about SME needs, what they're seeing, any market-based questions so that we can understand if there's any nuances and how they're responding, you know, they're recovering from the pandemic, all those sorts of questions. So we're constantly listening. And I mean, what I really love actually about Allica is that, I mean, a lot of businesses do that listening, but then nothing happens with that information. Allica, this actually really fuels the strategy of the bank. And I think that's what will make them successful and is making them successful in helping local businesses, is because they have that understanding and they're actually listening and actioning what they hear.
I know a lot of big brands struggle with that regionality, and a lot of the time they have huge job titles. They have the EMEA job title. So how do you focus on areas specifically in England when actually you're responsible for countries over continents? So what advice would you give for bigger brands that are looking to start being more regional and starting to have that more, I suppose, personable relationships with people? I
think, I mean, feet on the ground is obviously the best way, and I know that's not always possible. But if not, it's listening to that community and making sure that you're constantly listening. I think if you can't have people there, then at least know what's going on and be able to adapt. And, you know, don't assume a kind of one size fits all. And I mean, I used to do an EMEA role as well, and it was a challenge of having a really small marketing team and trying to service France and Germany. And we were selling security products, so you can imagine that the preferences across different countries was vastly different. So we're trying to sell American security into Germany, you know, very, very different needs. So the challenge is that you've got to kind of think local, don't kind of do a one size fits all, and be able to take that feedback and have something that you can adapt and you can regionalize easily. One tactic we use is we create sort of centralized assets, say for our relationship managers, that we know we can then tweak and localize as needed. So you're not completely creating new things for every region, but you're using something that can be tailored and it can feel more personal and it can feel more relevant then to the businesses in that area.
Amazing. So just before we started recording, you were sharing a bit about your experiences at Allica Bank and the rapid growth. So I don't know if you want to tell us a bit more about that from when you joined to today.
Yeah, sure. So I joined in October 2020. We opened our doors for trading at the height of the pandemic. It was March 2020. I think we were in, I guess, an unusual position because a lot of the banks, and rightly so, switched to doing the government emergency scheme lending. This actually, whilst fantastic, left a big hole for a lot of businesses that may not have been as impacted or may have been really positively impacted from the lockdowns. And so we really focused on actually trying to help those businesses that still needed finance, but, you know, for opportunity. I think what we did well as well is the listening to this. We went solely through brokers to begin with, and I think listening to what the needs were and working with that community and providing a support when lots of banks were tied up or they were turning their backs away. We were actually kind of, you know, our arms are open, come and join us. And it was, I guess, riding that wave for a little bit that gave us that first sort of step up. And then we launched our direct to SME business last March, so a year after we started trading. And I actually we work in squads within the business. So we have teams of cross-functional people focused on products or business challenges, and we're completely dedicated to trying to, improve those processes or create products that the market needs. And I head up one called the Growth Squad, and it's all about how we build the business for direct to SME customers. And so we launched that last year, and we've just we had 6 relationship managers last year. We're now going to be up to 20 this year. So we've been able to put more and more relationship managers out in those communities. And it's just gone from rapid growth to growth, I think, with Allica. I think the market's responded well, I think, because we've we do like to listen. I know I've said that a lot, but it's one of the things that I think has made Allica very successful is they do genuinely listen, they do genuinely care, and they do genuinely action what they hear.
Well, I think that's the big bit, isn't it? Because I think people are willing to share their challenges, but rather than it being a positive, it becomes a frustration if nothing's done about it.
Exactly.
So I think that's a massive part of it. And I suppose this is one more for the SMEs in our community who are growing rapidly. I know one of their challenges are maintaining culture, particularly when they're hiring so quickly and they end up having people that have been there 3 months training the new person. And the 3-month-old is suddenly a veteran in the business. I assume that's something you guys must have come across recently as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're never the new person for very long at Allica at the moment, that's for sure. We've been hiring like crazy, and it's been, I think the thing is that they hire carefully. So, I mean, I've definitely not worked at a company that's been as fast-paced as Allica. It's just constant go. But if you like that environment, it's fantastic. And they hire people who like to work in those environments and thrive there. So actually, it's a really fantastic way to work.
And it must help you relate to SMEs.
Exactly. I mean, we are really. Maybe we're sort of growing out of that. I mean, it's that definition again, isn't it, SME? But I mean, maybe we're starting to grow away from that. But if you think about how long we've actually been trading, it's really not been very long. And we've gone from, being very, very small team starting a bank into something that's scaling very rapidly. And that obviously comes with its own challenges as well, where you grow the business, but you don't want to start cracking at the seams as you grow too quickly. So that's something that's been managed quite carefully too, but I think they're doing a very good job of it so far.
Let's talk a bit about, obviously, meaningful relationships sound like they're a massive part of the strategy and what really works for Allica Bank. How do you balance that with doing things at scale? Because I'm sure you want to do as many one-to-one conversations as you can, but actually you've got to get the messaging out there on a broader scale as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And the other part of our proposition is technology. We think of ourselves as a fintech rather than a bank. And we have, we've got a really big tech team, and they really hire carefully with tech, because what we're trying to do is have tech solutions, and we build most things in-house. Have solutions that enable us as a business to scale, so be able to help customers. And this isn't just about hoofing off customers into digital journeys so we don't have to talk to them. This is about building processes, so when they come to us and they need help for finance, we make it as easy and quick as possible, so they're not having to faff around with lots of paper forms or anything. We just want to make it quick. And another way we sort of use tech is to enable our relationship managers to be out in the communities, do their job on the road easily, be able to help the client at their premises. And I love this sort of analogy of back in the day, clients would they would dress up in their suit and they would go to their bank and meet their bank manager, and it would always be on their terms when the bank's open. Now it's very different. We'd rock up in our, more casual clothes if needed, or smarter if the client wants. Go to their premises, go to their factory, go to their offices, meet on their terms, and bring banking to them, really. So it's about using technology in clever ways that doesn't bog us down as a company and make it harder for us to service, clients. It's also about having enough people as well. The people element's really important. So if we have more customers, we will always hire and put more relationship managers there, because that's really important to us. We'll never be, okay, no, actually we've only got this many relationship managers, build up their client list. It's quite the opposite. It's making sure that they've got a manageable portfolio and that they can give those clients the attention they need. But yeah, supported by tech that just makes lives easier for customers and also for the business.
All this is music to the ears of founders, that things can be done at pace, they can be done on their terms. How do you manage that going forward? As a company, Allica Bank is growing so quickly. How do you make sure that actually you don't get bogged down in your own processes and actually you end up in a place where you can't keep up with the smaller businesses?
I think eat our own dog food. So our tech teams are also building internal processes. And one of the things, so part of the growth squad, for example, that I run, when we were looking at how we build this relationship manager network, we built a really great CRM at the heart of it. Something that would make their lives super easy, super quick, and ensure that they could do their jobs without having really clunky tech or processes that really hold them back. And it's a shame. A lot of the bigger banks have this, and it's difficult for them to pull those processes out. They might have completely different systems for everything. And so we're, I guess, in a fortunate position that we've been able to build from the ground up, which means that we've been able to start building what the business needs from the very beginning, rather than kind of having to patch different tech solutions together. So that's been really good. It means that we can just keep running and keep enabling the business, and ensuring that there's internal processes as well as what we can offer the customers is a big focus.
Yeah, so there's a lot of in-person, by the sounds of it, whether it's on the phone or physically in person. When you're looking at platforms, particularly comms platforms, what do you find most effective?
I guess in terms of so the CRM, I'll start with the CRM, we use HubSpot, which is absolutely fantastic because my squad is not very techy. We don't actually have any engineers or anything in the squad. And we managed to build a CRM that seems to work very well because it's so intuitive. And I actually would really recommend HubSpot to companies and to businesses who might be starting out as well, because it's so accessible and so easy. And it's a great communication platform. You can communicate with customers. They can book meetings directly with their relationship managers. The relationship managers can communicate through HubSpot via phones or emails, etc. In terms of how we communicate with our customers too, I think we actually use LinkedIn a lot. LinkedIn's been quite a good platform for us. We haven't really used any other social channels, just from a resources perspective. And this is an example of us just saying, we haven't got enough people right now to focus on Twitter, and we have a Twitter account, but we're not using it at the moment. And we make conscious decisions on what we do and what we don't do, so that we don't try and do everything and do it a bit.
So it's a case of picking your battles and being effective in those spaces.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, really communication is also about having those inbound channels available. So we make sure we spend a lot of time on our contact us page, for example, because we've got completely different groups of customers who want to talk to us. We've got savings customers, we've got SME customers, brokers. It might be inbound press, it's all sorts of, opportunities as well that might come. So we want to make sure that we can channel people through to the right place. So we spend a lot on making sure that we've got a good telephony system, and we can ensure that we've got teams on the ground. We've got a great customer service team as well who work across that. It's just having those channels available. And
we've got just a couple of minutes left. So I guess what would be your big advice for someone that's, say, moving across within a big brand to the SME team, and it's their first time dealing with these smaller scaling businesses? What should they be looking out for? And what's the advice there?
I think before you do anything is go and speak to them. What you think you might know could have been right, but it might not be right now. So I really advise that. I think it's easy to jump in and think, okay, we've got an idea of what we need to do. But I think until you actually really ask and understand them, it's difficult to get that right. And you might get it right for a few, but it's how do you become accessible and available to many? And that's very difficult because they're all very unique and they've got very different needs, and you need to be in tune to those, and you need to be able to adapt. I think actually that's another one, is the ability to be able to adapt and move quickly. So don't put all your eggs in one basket and maybe invest in something and spend a year trying to get it off the ground before you launch. Just get something out there quickly, just test it, learn. If it's not working, pull it. Because I think in the SME market, you've got to be able to move, and you've got to be able to move quickly.
It sounds like a scaling business is
exactly.
a big part of it. And I guess just to finish off, it'd be great to hear an example of a scaling business that you love, either personally as a customer or someone that you admire from a brand or a business point of view. I really love patch plants. I love patch plants for several reasons. I love them because I love plants. I love patch plants because I think they took a concept. I think when people think of having a new business idea, it's almost got to be, they think of, it's got to be something completely new. And actually they took something that's obviously been around for a very long time, and they took a problem, which was people, particularly living in cities, not understanding or having access to great plants in the same way that people outside of London might have, and also that knowledge bit, understanding what they are. And they just took it and they understood the market,
and how to make it accessible. They named the plants into names people can remember and pronounce, which is great.
Which helps.
Yeah, and they built a great website, so it's easy to go and purchase things. And they just made it accessible and easy. And I think that, for me, I mean, it's a brand I love and use, but I just really admire their whole business model. I think it's very smart, it's very simple, and it works really well.
Do you find, I find this a little bit, brands that I'm a big fan of, personally, that I use in my personal life, I love to then get involved in the Founding Network. Do you do that as well with Allica Bank?
Not yet, but I will.
You absolutely should. Well, look, Chloe, thank you for coming on. Thanks for being our very first guest. I think there's a lot there that people can learn and take away to their own day job. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks for having me.